Action!
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Grudge Report, where we talk about the Foundation. Today we're going to talk about Season 1, Episode 6, which is called Death and the Maiden. I'm Margaret Reeb of the SETI Institute, and I am joined, as always, by Franck Marchis, who is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute and chief science officer at Unistellar. And we have a lot to talk about because this episode is chock full of interesting things, including some science that we're going to talk about. So if you haven't watched this episode, turn back now or you're going to be spoiled, but definitely come back once you've seen it. So, Franck, let's start with the Empire Day. He's Lee Pace. And he is headed to a moon called the Maiden. But we get a really cool scene at the beginning of the episode where he's traveling faster than light through space. What did you make of this scene?
Yeah, well, in this scene, we learn a little bit more about the spacers. So those are kind of human beings. In fact, they're engineered human beings, meaning they probably modify them genetically to adapt them to space travel. But what you see, they are different. But I mean, they look human, but they have some slight difference, like a long neck. The eyes are different as well. So that's the physical transformation we can see. But apparently, there is more than that, because they can also stay awake doing the jump, which apparently other human beings can't for some reasons, because they can lose their consciousness, but their spacer can. So that's very. I like this scene because we understand a bit more about how this technology works, and also it seems that the Empire is really controlling that. They have access to the spacer and they know the technology, and I think that's the strength of the Empire, is they control this technology of distorting space-time to travel super fast across the galaxy, and others can't. So that's I mean, it's cool that we see this spacer a bit more, and I'm very curious to learn more about this technology, and I know we will, because I was reading some article about the spacer, and I see that there is like already a community of people working on defining who they are and what they do. And I don't remember they were mentioned in the book of Foundation. So I think this is a pure invention, right?
I think it is. Definitely the distribution of technology and the fact that the Empire's control comes from having all of this cutting edge technology is in the book. But I don't think the spacers are, at least the books that I've read. And Dimrazel is also on the ship with Day and the spacers, and we learn that she's also able to stay awake during the jump. And she says something interesting, which I'm not going to recall word for word, but she essentially says humans are so used to time moving in one direction that if it folds and bends, their minds can't take it, their consciousness can't take it, and they sort of lose all connection with who they are, which I thought it was very interesting. And if you'll remember, our friend Gail was able to wake up during her jump, so I think that says something about her relationship with reality and time.
Yep.
It's interesting. We also learned that Dimrazel is a luminist. She believes in this religion that is on Maiden and is threatening the Empire, which I thought was interesting. And what do you make of a robot being religious, Franck?
Well, she's very old. She's more than 12,000 years old. So over this 12,000 years old of existence, she probably changed and evolved, and not a personality may have changed, and the complexity of a brain probably as well. And I mean, being only robots in the galaxy must make her probably lonely, and she needs to have some kind of connection. And the luminist needs to, basically, it's kind of a religion that could attract a robot because it's related to consciousness and the soul. So she probably is kind of researching. She probably wants to know whether or not she has a soul. And I'm making up a story here, but it's probably, I think she has encountered this religion and she was attracted by it because of that, because of this, the fact that they try to get the connection between consciousness and the genetic and the soul. Let's see how it goes when she reveals that she's a robot.
Yes, because people don't know that she's a robot, and outside of the Empire, probably the 3 clones and maybe a handful of other very close advisors, but we aren't sure. It's a secret from the masses. And let's talk about Maiden, which is where they land. It looks pretty warm and dusty. There doesn't seem to be a lot of water, and it's a moon, right? Franck?
Yes, that's what I understood from the show as well, and apparently you also. Maiden is a satellite of a giant planet. It could be like we see the giant planet at the beginning of the beginning of this episode, and there is multiple moon. Maiden is one of them. Is an habitable one. I don't know if the other ones are habitable.
I don't think so. They say that in the show that Maiden is the only habitable one. Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 of them. And that's kind of the base of the religion. Remember, the religion is based on the 3 characters, the Trinity.
Maiden, Mother, Crone.
Exactly.
Shout out to Game of Thrones fans who found that very familiar. But yeah.
And so it's a moon. And as you say, it's very kind of dry. So habitable moon could exist. In fact, if you look to go to science, in our solar system, we do think there is possible. It's possible that Europa has an ocean, okay, and we are looking into the ocean. We will look into the ocean to find some microbes, for instance. So this is a kind of habitability that you can expect for a moon. Enceladus could be habitable as well because we think there is vents and there is some signatures, some kind of biological signatures into these vents.
And Titan.
But in the case, in Titan as well, Titan, which is low temperature, very different. We're going to send a spacecraft over there, so we're going to know more about it. But in this case, it's habitable for human beings. So it means that the gravity should be more or less the same. So the moon must be gigantic, okay? Remember, the moon of the Galilean moon are huge. They're basically the size of Mercury or our moon, but they're still not the size of Earth. Mm-hmm. So to have a gravity similar to our planet, those moons should have Maiden should have at least a size close to the size of Earth. So it's something we have not seen yet in our solar system. So maybe it's outside another planetary system. We will find that. But then there is a problem of the habitability. Is not only the gravity, is also the atmosphere, the temperature. So does that mean that the planet and the moons is in the habitable zone in this case? Okay, because the temperature
of the star.
Star. Okay, so that means that the Jupiter-sized planet is very close to its star. Also, something that now our planet is 5 times the distance. Our Jupiter is 5 times the distance Earth's sun, so it's very far away. We have seen Jupiter-sized exoplanets in orbit around the star at proximity. Some of them, like they orbit in 3 days around the stars. But we also have what we call the long period Jupiter, and some of them orbit around the star in 400 days, 1,000 days. They're very rare because to detect them, you use transits. So it means a transit method. So it means that we have to observe them. You have to be observing right when they're transiting the star, which is rare since it happens once every 300 or 400 days. But we're starting discovering that, in fact, Jupiter-sized exoplanet could be in the habitable zone of the star. So now we have a moon in the habitable zone of the star. Does that mean that the moon is habitable? Look around. Our moon is in the habitable zone of a star. It's not habitable. So here, what's important is the presence of an atmosphere.
Right.
And the atmosphere, Earth doesn't, the moon doesn't have an atmosphere because it's too small. So once again, we go back to the size. It implies that Maiden is a huge satellite of its planet. It's the size of Earth, and it has an atmosphere. Okay, so now the atmosphere is there, the temperature, we have what we need for human being, but now we are also a satellite in orbit around another planet, a gigantic planet. The environment is different. You are into the magnetosphere of the planet, so you're bombarded by electrons and protons continuously. I don't know how Maiden people are surviving this, and also most of the time those satellites are tidally locked. So that will imply, if the case for Maiden, it will imply that Maiden is tidally locked. So that means that it shows always the same size, the same face toward the planet. So the temperature which will not evolve similarly that if the planet was orbiting around the star and spinning on 20 hours. So we don't have example yet of Maiden-like satellites. So there is no research made on habitability of exomoons because we have not yet seen for sanctity an exomoon. But this is an interesting world, and they will. And I'm not surprised. Is basically it lacks of water,
right?
Because it's probable. It's very likely there is a huge volcanic activity. In fact, we don't see the entire.
So close to its planet, right?
Yeah. So the planet like Io dried up. Io is one of these satellites of Jupiter. It has almost no water. It completely dries up because of a continuous activity for billions of years. You basically lose the volatile elements. So water is one of them. So that dries the planet. So this is a very long conversation to just say that we don't know much about habitability of exomoons. But Maiden, I'm not surprised that Maiden is a desertic planet.
Yes. Yes. It makes sense that the climate isn't perfect for humans. And in fact, we don't spend a lot of time outside of the city on Maiden, but still we don't see any vegetation or birds or bugs or anything. They're probably microbes maybe, but we don't see a lot of the biosphere other than just sand.
Yeah, there is a scene that I wanted to point out in this. It's when the door opened. Did you notice that?
And he blinks at the light.
The demoiselle stay like this doesn't have any motion, and the emperor is blinking because the light is very strong because of the change of luminosity. I love this scene because I thought it was very cool that they thought about that.
Anyway. Yes, there are a lot of really great scenes in this part of the episode, and one of them that I think we should talk about before we move on is when there's clearly, as we have heard before, a showdown between Cleon, the emperor that's on the planet, and Halima, Zephyr Halima, who might take over as the matriarch of the planet, and she kind of commandeers the previous Proxima during her funeral. She commandeers the microphone, for lack of a better word, and starts this rousing speech about the three goddesses and luminism and the power of reincarnation and continuing to improve your soul and reaching towards enlightenment, it seemed like, and how if you aren't reincarnated like the Cleon clones, your soul rots away, maybe even goes away. And it seems to really resonate with everybody except, of course, for Brother Day. What did you make of this, Franck?
I do like this scene. I watched this speech 2 or 3 times because I thought it was beautifully written. But yeah, it's a direct attack on the emperor. I like the way she starts it. Definitely, the way you should always start a speech when you want to make your point. She starts with a very positive note and then slowly goes into the stating the facts and changing the pace of the speech. I'm not good at giving speech, so I'm not going to comment on that. But the fact that the robot itself, Demoiselle, it seems to agree with her, it's kind of a game changer, I think. That something broke in the Empire here. Mm-hmm. When we see Demoiselle agreeing with Zephyr Halima somehow, showing some kind of agreement. And yes. They definitely, the Emperor, they definitely, Brother, they definitely didn't like that.
Yes. she bows at the end because everyone else is bowing in reverence. In a religious moment, yes. And Demerzel, who looks, I think she looked a little upset at what was being said about reincarnation, because obviously she's a robot and won't be reincarnated, but she still bows. And I was thinking this whole time, why don't they just kill Zephyr Halima? But they make the point several times that Luminism is a huge religion. It has so many adherents across the galaxy that it, doing something to interfere with the religion would probably upset a lot of people. Yeah. So the Empire is in a hard place right now.
And the Emperor is trying to fix this by giving presents, basically.
Yes.
I'm going to give you water by providing funding or to get desalinization plants. So I'm going to build a base or in space. I mean, it's trying to give them stuff, saying, okay, stay with us, stay with the Empire, follow the line of the Empire. In exchange, you're going to get all of this, all those technology, this technology that your planet needs. So this implies as well there is a lot of people on this planet. I was surprised, but if you want to build desalinization plants or provide water and etc., it's not for this handful number of people we see in the show. It's probably there is a population. We don't know where they live, but they are around. They are on this planet.
And they hold the key to the Empire's fall in their hands. They probably don't even realize. So I think I know we will definitely be back on Maiden, and I'm excited to follow that plot line. But let's move to Trantor, the planet that's the seat of the Empire, because we see the other Cleons. Mostly we see Day, but of course Dusk is in the background trying to make we see Dawn. The younger and the older, and the older Dusk is trying to make a man out of Dawn. And there's a lot of toxic masculinity vibes in this episode. I was
about to say it's very it's
sorry,
didn't change that much basically between 1920 now and and the year 10,000. You're gonna have sex and you're gonna hunt. I mean, come on.
Yes.
Talk about here.
But no relationships, and you have to be exactly like your grandpa or whatever, Dusk. So let's talk a little bit about this tension, because I've sensed a lot of tension with Dawn, but you don't really understand why until this episode. So he goes on a hunt at Dusk's request, and they're hunting some sort of chicken-like bird.
Pheasants?
That's how Franck described it. Yes.
I pointed out that it's the first time we see an animal on Trantor, to my knowledge. Remember, Trantor is a planet city, okay?
Right.
But on the surface, only live the Empire, and we can see trees and flowers, etc. Artificial insects, but this time we finally see a real animal, something like kind of look like a pheasant. It's a mix of a pheasant and a chicken. And you have comments about this hunt.
My only comment will be that as somebody who grew up around hunters, the bird is quite small and the guns and the bullets seem quite large. So I'm not sure what the plan is with the birds, if it's simply to just dump them. They clearly aren't going to eat them because they've destroyed them, or mount them. So anyways, that's enough of my Midwestern thoughts that I had while watching the show. But what's interesting is Dawn shoots 6 of them, which is way over the record set by Dusk, and he hides the extras so that it looks like he ties. And it seems like a little bit of a play to keep Dusk's ego from getting too out of sorts. Is that what you thought, Franck?
That's what I thought too. Mm-hmm. I think Don is a smart guy. He understood the relationship dynamic between the 3 emperors, and somehow he needs to make sure that the older emperor still has his pride and still happy that he does things better, a few things better, and hunting will be one of it. I think it's always good to keep to. Each generation will do something better, right? So in the case of Dawn is Dusk, we will see is probably he's a wise man who knows how to hunt. Good. I think it's an attempt from Dawn to also keep it low key because he has a secret. He knows there is something wrong with himself that we can.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it seems at first like an ego play, and then it may be a little bit more than that because there's this blooming romance between Dawn and Azora, who is the, I want to say botanist,
yeah,
the imperial botanist, gardener, who he ran into a couple episodes back, and they're forging a friendship or a little baby romance, and he reveals to her that he is colorblind, which is a departure from all the other clones, right, Franck?
Yeah, because no other emperors were colorblind before. So that implies that it's not identical, because colorblindness is a genetic anomaly, which is very common. There is a multiple type of colorblindness in the human being, but if I remember, 8 to 10% of male are colorblind at a specific level, and there is some people who are very strongly colorblind. And in this case, it seems to be a very strong colorblindness because he doesn't know the color of the plants. He asks,
Right.
that's the way we found out. He asks colors. He asks, what's the color of this? So, I mean, most people colorblind, the common color blindness, you don't see well the color, but you see the color. I mean, it's very difficult to
a little grayed.
Yeah, it's the grayish
or brown. Mm-hmm.
So you mix
he clearly,
maybe.
He can't see red. I know for sure because he's asking particularly about reds. So something happened to make him colorblind.
What happened? Is that something voluntary? That's something someone did? The muzzle is in charge of that, apparently. Or is that something that happened because of time? Because that's the generation 14, if I remember. So that is the 17th copy of the same emperor. And as you know, when you do a copy, you probably don't remember that when we were copying tapes at the time in my generation in the 70s. We were noticing that the copies.
What's a tape? I'm just kidding. I know.
I knew you would use that.
But it degrades a little bit, correct?
And even when you copy on a software on a computer, a file, you can make a system that will copy a file like gazillion of time from one disk to another one and disk to another one. After a while, you will see that this copy will not be perfect. There will be some anomaly popping up. There is software or algorithm that check these anomalies and correct them. For instance, what you can do, you do two files that you copy, and every time you see a degradation on one by counting the numbers, you say, okay, check this one and do a comparison. So there is a way to avoid that. And I'm surprised that in the super technology that they have, they did not think about it, or I think something happened someone did it maybe voluntarily. We will see.
We will see. It's very intriguing. So let's talk about Terminus, which I think has the bulk of the runtime of this episode. But there isn't a lot of science. There are lots of battles and fights, but at a very high level, Salvo is rescued from Farah in the Anacreons by two kids who I think are very cute and do a great job on scene. And they escape the city via geothermal vents. And in a huge stroke of luck, when they emerge, Salvo runs almost immediately into her father and her boyfriend, who have also seemed to escape the Anacreons. And they hatch a plan to try and destroy the Anacreon corvettes. They're like nimble warships. But in the middle of that, something strange happens. Do you want to talk about it, Franck, or should I?
Yes, Salvo has a vision of the past where basically she sees a conversation between Harry and Rach. And we found out that Harry asked his adoptive son, Rach, to kill him. And the reason is because the relationship between Rach and Gal is basically moving psychohistory toward the end of the empire and the end of civilization for some reasons, which is in complete contradiction to what basically Harry has been saying, that it's not one person that changed psycho. History is not a study of one person; it's a study of a global study of history and events. But anyway, this is such a big event, the relationship between Gal and Rach, that he will move the destruction of the empire faster and will basically change the plan of the foundation. So he doesn't like that, of course, and he finds a way. The best way to make sure that this does not happen is by asking, in all this complex calculation, by asking Rach to kill him. So Rach will be accused, but Rach will also escape to this spaceship. But something went wrong because, as you know, Gail basically saw the event, and it's Gail who is in the spaceship now, trying to follow the plans.
Yes, she interrupted Harry's grand plan and skewed everything. So we learn more about Harry and his thoughts in the next episode. But I do agree with you, Franck. It strikes me as Harry might have been a little jealous, or there was something else going on, because I'm not quite sure how he understood that these actions by two individuals would have such profound impact, because he says multiple times that you can't anticipate the acts of individuals.
Yeah.
Psychohistory is about groups. So maybe we'll learn more. And what do you make of Salvo having these visions? It seems like she has some connection to past events. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. It's not science, but personally, I think it makes it interesting in the story. So this way we find out pieces of the past. So it's very useful. She does that for the story itself. But it's also implied that Salvo is a very interesting character. She can go through the vault, Newell field. She has those visions. She can also read people. You remember, she can, by looking at people in a few minutes, she knows a lot about their personality. She can read their mind or something. Is she really human?
Don't know. I had never thought, that had not occurred to me, but they have done a lot of groundwork for how robots or genetically engineered people can look just like humans and maybe not even know themselves. So that's interesting. She's got some special power going on. And unfortunately, she does suffer a loss. Her father, Abbas, follows sort of the standard plan of a important side character dying to further the emotional development of a main character. He tells a very sweet story about falling in love with his wife, Salvo's mother, and why he joined the foundation, and says that he loves Salvo very much. And then, I don't know, about 5 minutes later, he dies. But he does blow up the Corvettes in a very interesting scene. But he, costs him his life. And then Salvo and Hugo, who survived the explosion, are taken back into custody by the Anacreons and forced to fly them to a ghost ship, the legendary Imperial cruiser, the Invictus. So that's where we end the episode. And the Anacreons have cherry-picked people from the Foundation based on their skills to find, board, and pilot the Invictus, right, Franck?
Yes, and you remember the last episode you were asking why did they blow up the Imperial spaceship? Mm-hmm. But in fact, what they were interested not in the Imperial spaceship, they were interested in the commander of the Imperial spaceship, because strategically speaking, he's gonna be able to help them enter into the Invictus because it's an Imperial spaceship. And and then they cherry pick the people in the Foundation who have some knowledge in this propulsion system, hoping to be able to reactivate the Invictus. Apparently, it's a spaceship that disappeared a long time ago. I mean, we're talking about thousands of years here, right? And
it seems to be, yes.
Yeah, there's been a spaceship has been appearing from different parts of the galaxy from time to time. So it's a this is an interesting story. Frankly, I'm very happy we left Terminus because I really didn't like the storyline there. As I say, the battles and the running around, shooting at people in the desert, totally not interesting to me. But now we are in space. We are going to be in space. I'm gonna see an ancient spaceship. So that's gonna be an interesting storyline.
Yes, yes, and I'm sure we will get into that in the next episode
Oh,
quite
you had a
thoroughly.
comments. I remember we talked briefly about this before the show.
Yes.
About Salvo. Come on, just say it.
Well, in some, plot magic, Hugo makes it so that only Salvo can pilot the ship because otherwise there was really no reason to keep Salvo alive because she was born on Terminus, from what I understand, and she's never been off planet. So he does some magic so that she has to pilot the ship. And so they all board the ship, and this woman who is very tough but has never piloted a spaceship pilots the spaceship off planet, and she does it through her feelings. So I hope that they dive more into what makes her special and what her connection is. But she does have an interesting moment where when she's about ready to what's the word where take off, she turns and looks to Farah and flips the coin again, and she predicts what the coin flip is going to be. And I was curious. The whole thing was very interesting, but that moment was, I think that's foreshadowing for something that's going to come later. I don't know what. But what did you make of this scene?
Well, I think the power also is the fact that she can predict the future on the short time scale. She has a lot of different powers, but this is one of them. So that's why she always knows where the coin's gonna be. So maybe that's it's an ability that allows us to know how to make sure that the spaceship is not going to crash when she's using it to take off. If you can see the future on a scale of a few minutes, you can do actions to avoid a disaster. So that's what basically she's been doing to be able to take off.
Yes.
Very practical. You don't know what you're doing, but you're sure you avoid a disaster. I mean, come on, this is a great skill.
I would love it. I mean, that sounds wonderful. And one thing that I think we should note about this is that Salvo begins to understand that the Anacreons coming to Terminus and wanting to strike at the heart of the Empire is the first Selden crisis.
Yeah.
And Harry Selden predicted several crises in the fall of the Empire. And I think the religious luminism is another one that's happening, or maybe all of this happening at the same time is one of the crises. But Salvo thinks that this is one of the crises and that she is supposed to solve what's going on and protect the Foundation. So what do you think about that? Do you think she's right? Does this seem like a crisis?
It's a crisis, definitely. I mean, there's multiple crises at the same time, but that's the point of the show, right? If there was no crisis, it would be kind of boring to see the Foundation growing and nothing happening.
Farming,
but
writing down knowledge. Yes,
I think the religious crisis is it's gonna be a big deal too. The speech of Zephyr Alima is a key moment in this episode in my mind. That's the most important part of the story. Even though it's just a tiny, it doesn't say much, but the relationship, there is something's gonna broke here during the speech between the Empire and this religion. No matter what's going to happen, if the Fialinma is elected or not, the schism is happening, and the split between the Empire and this religion is going to have a huge impact because they have 3 trillion followers. So, and then the plan of the Anacreon to get an imperial spaceship just for themselves. It's a dangerous plan because you remember we talk about those spaceships. They create a mini black hole, and distort the space-time. So if you give that in the hands of terrorists or whatever you want to call Farah and a team, they are going to be able to do a lot of damages.
It's not good.
Yeah,
For the Empire. Depends on whose side
yeah,
you're
if
on.
they don't to sacrifice their life, imagine they just jump into the planet. If they jump into the planet, they destroy the planet, basically.
Yeah, it would not be good.
That'd be good. We see.
No. We shall see. Yes. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Grudge Report. I just would be remiss if I didn't remind you that we are a product of the SETI Institute, which is a nonprofit research institution whose mission is to understand the nature and origin of life in the universe. So if you are new to the Grudge Report or new to the SETI Institute, please click all the links below to get to know us, to get notified about new videos, and perhaps even make a donation if you support our mission. And as always, please also leave comments. We'd love to know what you think about our discussion, if we missed any points, or if Franck was wrong, because I'm always right. Just kidding. Please leave a comment and stay tuned for the next episode. We'll see you then.
Bye, Margaret. See you next week.
Bye, Franck.